This is Prospect Ricky Manasco, and you're listening to the Ranger Report podcast.
Whoa, Ranger Report. Oh, Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. All right, yeah, here we go.
This is the Ranger Report podcast. News, insights, predictions, interviews, and information about the Texas Rangers from the major leagues to the minor leagues. And now, here are your hosts, Ben Dieter and CJ Berryman.
Experience the joy of watching your friends and family's faces light up when you feed them wild game you harvested and made into delicious sausages, or meat you barbecue and grill with the finest seasonings available. Visit our friends at Waltons.com to find everything you need to turn wild game into tasty meat snacks, or spice up your barbecue with new flavors and seasonings. With over 500 seasonings to choose from, there's something that everyone will love. They even have step-by-step videos and how-to articles at Meatgistics to help you go from animal to edible. Use coupon Rangers15 at checkout to save 15% on your first order at Waltons.com. Waltons, everything but the meat.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Ranger Report podcast, brought to you by Dallas Sports Nation and also by Walton's Everything But the Meat. We are proud to be joined today by Dallas Cowboys play-by-play man Brad Sham. Brad, how are you, sir?
Hall of Famer. Thank you, CJ. It's good to be with both of you guys.
It's good to have you on, sir. It's great to see. I mean, I hear your voice so often. It's kind of fun to actually see you talking now.
Yeah, it's really not very exciting, but well, that's the kind of life you're living, Ben. And
well, you know, that's why we do an online. That's why we do a podcast and not a video show. So
I understand.
All right, I want to start off. I know you've been friends with him forever. You spent some time working with Eric Nadel when you covered the Rangers. What was it like working with him on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it was a treat. We have been friends forever. We met in the 70s when I was just trying to find my way, and Eric was doing minor league hockey. And if you think he's good doing baseball, you ought to hear him do hockey. He could walk right into it today. And so a bunch of circumstances obtained, and they were looking for someone to work with Eric. Mark Holtz had to move to TV, and Eric and I had known each other forever. He knows how I feel about baseball, and it worked out. And so it was literally a dream come true for me, because when I was a middling teenager and trying to decide what I was going to do with my life, what I really wanted to be was a baseball announcer. And this was my opportunity, because at that point in my career, I had done a lot of things, and I'd done a little baseball, but I hadn't done it on a regular basis. And I wasn't going to get hired as a major league announcer in any other circumstances other than the station, which was KRLD at the time, needed some local identification because they were switching stations after many, many years on WBAP. And it was going to be a little bit of a shock to the system of a lot of Ranger fans. And so I had name identification in town. So it gave me an opportunity to do something that I had literally wanted to do since I was a young person. And I learned so much. I loved traveling with him, and I learned more about doing play-by-play from him than I can even begin to recount. And I say it all the time, Ben. I tell audiences every chance I get, I'm a better football announcer today because of the opportunities that I've had to be exposed to Eric Nadel doing baseball. Play-by-play is play-by-play. And I learn from him now. I turn on the radio and I hear him now, and he makes me better. So it was literally a dream come true.
That's awesome. So you called during a strange time in Rangers era. You called some games when they had replacement players in Major League Baseball. Was it a lot harder to repair? What was it like doing games with replacement players?
Well, that was the first year I was on the job, and I had been through it with the Cowboys in the NFL. So I went to spring training with the replacement players, and I knew how to prepare to learn replacement players. I knew how to research them. I knew how to get to know them. I knew how to tell their stories because I'd done it with the Cowboys in '87. That was in '94. And we were in spring training, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and then came back getting ready to open the season. And then they settled the strike, and we had to go back and have another spring training. I'm not sure that the replacements ever played any games, but they sure practiced to, they prepared to. And it was, I'm not going to tell you it was the easiest thing in the world, but I had experience doing some of that stuff. So I felt like I was ready to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then what were some of your favorite memories of your few years calling the Rangers? You actually got to call their very first time being in the playoffs as well.
Yes. Thank you for reading my mind. I like to point out that, and I was at the Rangers' first ever game. I was a reporter for another little radio station in Dallas, and I was there the night David Clyde started the very first game, his very first game, and I was there the night of their first game at the old Turnpike Stadium. And so I do like to remind people that they never made the playoffs till I got in the booth with them. It was thrilling. You know, in 94, 95, they came close. They took the season into maybe September, but certainly late August. And when you're a baseball fan, and especially one who's a little parched, that's good.
Yeah.
And as an announcer following a team every day, that's really all you can ask for. And then in 96, they make the playoffs for the first time, and Ranger playoff game I did was at Old Yankee Stadium. Now, how are you going to get better than that?
That's when Juan Gonzalez went off in that game 1 too.
He did, yeah. And this, I mean, it was a fun team to be around. It was a fun team to watch. I still have a bat somewhere in my office here with my favorite guy. I mean, obviously Pudge was exceptional, and Juan was a tremendous player. But the guys that I had asked to sign that bat, I'll have to find it sometime soon. Guys like Rusty Greer and Mickey Tettleton and Mark McLemore and Will Clark, Billy Ripken, those lunch bucket, blood and guts guys were the ones. Dave Valley, who was a really
Dave Valley, backup catcher,
backup catcher, but he was the conscience of the team. And so it was just great being around that team and seeing their success and seeing them make it to the playoffs. It's disappointing when you lose in the playoffs, but I have a little experience with that too.
Just a little.
And I really believe that I believe in the journey. And I say this all the time. I'm a native of Chicago. My mother made me a Cub fan. I'm still a Cub fan. And being a lifelong Cubs fan has taught me that I am not in any of this for the winning. I am literally, because if that's what you're in it for, you're going to have nothing but disappointment. And when I look back at 95, and 96, especially 96, now 97, the third year and the last year that I did the Rangers, they fell out of the race a little bit. They took it through July, and then they started trading pieces off. But in that 96 season, you know, it was the step by step when you realize everybody starts off hoping, and at some point you realize that you might be somewhat safe turning those hopes into mild expectations as long as you can just manage them. And then you get close to it and you see the buildup and you feel the team every day and you see what they're about and how the work they're putting into it. And so making the playoffs is a tremendous reward, especially in a season like a baseball season. And yeah, everybody wants to win the World Series, but there's only one team that's happy at the end of the year, and that doesn't mean there's only one team that's been successful. So that being around that playoff team was a joy. It's one of the great years of my life.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know you've called both, and you've called more, I'm sure. But what are the major differences you saw between calling baseball and calling football?
Well, I still think that baseball is the hardest sport to do well, because you have to have a different pace. Eric's pace is perfect for it. And you also have to have the ability to go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, because nothing's happening and nothing's happening and nothing's happening and all hell breaks loose. It's the only sport that does not automatically stop after a score. So you have to teach yourself, if you've got runners at first and second, the guy on second scores, no one's throwing the ball back in or stopping for a kickoff or going for a face-off, because the guy on first is still running. And you have to be on top of who the fielders are and where the guy is and what the coaches are doing and keep everything in context. And it's not that it's heavy lifting. It's not that it's that hard to do, but it requires great focus and concentration when the action hasn't been like that all the time. You know exactly what the rhythm of a football game is. You know what's going to happen on a play. You don't know the outcome of the play, but you know that there's going to be a snap and there's going to be some motion. There's going to be blocking and tackling, and something's going to happen at the end of that. And then we're going to stop and come back and do it all over again. And baseball's not like that. One of the things that made me fall in love with baseball was the battle between the pitcher and the batter. And I'm fascinated to this day by what pitchers are able to do: grip, arm slot, velocity, different kinds of pitches, and how hitters can try to react to that, and how a pitcher might pitch a guy one way in the second inning, and he pitched him that way partly because of what the game situation was, but partly because he has no intention of pitching him that way in the fifth inning.
Yeah.
He's going to pitch him a different way. And then the pitcher's got to remember that guy did this on these pitches, and the hitter's got to remember when he comes back up. I'll never forget being at Wrigley Field when the Cubs acquired Rizzo from the Padres and brought him up, and they didn't have anything else. But it was fascinating to watch him, watch how the pitcher pitched him early in the game, and how he adjusted to those same pitches the second time up, and the third time up, different pitcher, same kinds of pitches, and he had a completely different result. That's a little microcosm. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And the Rangers have had some great ones about that. So in baseball, you have to be mindful of all of that. You have to adjust to all of that stuff going on. And then with what Eric and Matt do now, and Eric and I did for 3 years, unlike on television, you have to let them smell the popcorn. You have to let them hear the chatter in the outfield. You have to let them feel the sunshine beating down on them. You're all 5 senses on the radio, and that's a great challenge, and it's one that I really love. And then the thing that's difficult about baseball, or at least challenging, is to be that storyteller, weave in at an easy pace. You cannot do baseball at the same pace you do basketball or hockey. So you're doing baseball at a baseball pace, and you're telling stories, and you're relating to things that happened elsewhere in the league last night and other things that you've seen and real life. One of the things that Eric and Matt do so well is talk about music and movies, but that's part of it. Yeah. That's part of the beauty of doing baseball. It's harder to do that in football, and it's just more challenging, I think, in baseball to keep that narrative going at exactly the right pace.
Yeah, Eric on this podcast told us that he and Matt, he actually got that from Holt's diversionary tactics. If it's a 8-1 game in the 6th inning and you know that nothing's going well, you got to find a way to continue to have the listener listen in. And I think he's the best at it. That's why he's a Hall of Famer too. I mean, there's exactly right. There's games where it's 10-1 and, I'm going to bed, but I still have the radio on, just listening to some of the stuff.
Because you're a Ranger fan, and Eric knows, as I do, that no one's turning on the radio to hear us. Now, Eric may make you enjoy the game more. You may be glad that Eric's the guy who's telling you the story. But you didn't turn the radio on to hear Eric. You turned the radio on to hear the Rangers. And I know that when I'm doing a Cowboy game, nobody turned it on to listen to me. They might, I hope they're happy that I'm doing it. Maybe I can enhance their enjoyment of it. But they turned on the radio to hear how the Cowboys are doing. And so if you can remember that, then you know how to keep your audience involved in those circumstances, CJ, that you're talking about, because they're coming. They are coming. Those games, when you play 162 of them now, those games are coming. You hope that they don't turn into months.
No, it did a couple times last year. So.
All right. Well, I grew up a Denver Broncos fan, but we'd be remiss not to have some football talk with you on. So I'm going to turn it over to CJ, who's a big Cowboys fan, to ask you some questions.
All right. I'm sure you were waiting for me to ask some questions, right, Brad?
I'm here for whatever you guys think you got.
Oh, and we appreciate it so much. So the way I look at it is with the Cowboys, it's been 26 years of futility. Haven't played in an NFC championship game since Moby Dick was a minnow. How difficult is that during this drought of not playing in a conference title game? How has it been on you, and how has it been on Babe?
Did you hear anything that I just said a few minutes ago? It's hard to win a football game in the NFL.
Yes, it is.
It's hard to win a game. Now, I'm not saying that it's acceptable to go that long a period of time without playing in a conference championship or winning a Super Bowl. It's not acceptable to them either. And they know that. I push back at the notion that it's been 26 years of futility. And I think this last season's a great microcosm of that. There's not a soul who follows the Dallas Cowboys who was pleased on January 16th. Everybody went home unhappy. Everybody was mad at everything. Fire them all and kill the ones you can't fire. And none of those people were saying that in October when they were 6-1. Now, you can't have a season with those up. You're not going to have ups without downs. Yeah. If you didn't have downs, how would you know what up was? And you cannot have a season with that many highlights, that many pleasurable moments, and call it futile, in my opinion. You can call it frustrating. You can call it disappointing. Okay. But I push back at futility because it was not futility. I really think that one of the problems with our society is that we have trained ourselves to only see success in the team that held up the trophy at the end of the year. Now, you go tell the Cincinnati Bengals they didn't have a good year.
Oh, heck no.
Go tell the San Francisco 49ers they didn't have a good year.
Right.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
But there's only one team holding up the trophy. And I maintain that's not the only team that had a good year. So what's it been like? It's been an absolute thrill and a privilege to be able to tell the story of these teams through these years. And it can be that and still be frustrating and disappointing. Those are not so contradictory that they can't exist in the same sentence. You know, Babe played for a long time with a bunch of teams, and he really understands it. You asked what's it like for him. And he understands what they go through and how difficult it is to win. We're as disappointed as anyone else when things don't go well. But I roundly reject the notion that it's abject failure, it's total failure, it's not. Well, then, you know what? Don't bother me with questions in training camp. Don't bother me in September and October. If all you're there for is the playoffs, don't watch and don't tweet me, and then watch the playoffs and feel however you want to feel. That's not what the season's all about. These things are about, whether it's baseball or football, these things are about sacrifice, shared experience, accountability, responsibility, learning how to win, learning how to lose, what to do with that disappointment. Those are the great lessons that make all of this stuff rich, whatever the sport. And that's why I really like team sports. And there's so much to be gained even from disappointing years. So, yeah, I would have loved to have done that game in LA, but maybe next year. And I'm lucky that I've done 4 and seen them win 3 of them. Now, Eric can't say, I know how Eric and I usually have lunch on a regular basis. And the year after they lost to the Cardinals, we were having lunch just before he went to spring training. And he said, I'm still not sure how I'm going to look at Nelson Cruz. And I get it. I understand. Yeah. So my counter to him was, if I told you 3 years ago that you were going to do the next 2 World Series, what would you have said? He'd have said, I'd have been thrilled. I said, well, that's what you just did. So you just have to learn that it's about the journey, and it's about the preparation, and it's about enjoying these games every day. These are artists, and they're truly gifted to be able to hit a ball or throw a ball or do the things they do. And we get to tell their stories. Now, what can be bad about that?
No, nothing. And my contention is being a lifelong. I was a Cowboys fan and a Rangers fan since conception. So, I don't have any questions that I feel it's appropriate to ask you. So before the season started, me and one of my best friends had lunch, and we were talking about the upcoming Cowboys season. And he was like, "I'm feeling more level now," because we would get so excited, and then just have that. It just felt like a letdown. In the playoffs, the 13-3 season in 2007, and then the 13-3 season in 2015, and then just bam, it just comes crashing. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm trying to stay here. And even though when they were 6-1, I was like, no, a game at a time, a game at a time. I'm not going to go, oh, we're going to win the Super Bowl. No, stay right here, stay level, because it's easier to fall from here than it is from here.
It's still going to hurt. Still going to be disappointing at the end. I mean, that's part of the human experience. Mm-hmm. And then, if you're fortunate, every once in a while, you get to enjoy what the Rams fans are right now. And the year the Bengals fans wouldn't trade that year for anything. Did they want to win? Darn right they did. But they wouldn't trade that year for anything. And we'll see what the Cowboys team looks like next year. They've got a lot of things to go through to put their roster together, but I bet they'll be competitive. And if fans don't want to believe in them, that's fine. But to me, if you don't just accept the journey and enjoy all the emotions, the highs and the lows, if you don't do that, you're cheating yourself. Yeah. You're the only one you're cheating out of experiencing everything that goes along with being a sports fan.
All right. Well, so let's talk about what some of your favorite teams to cover. I mean, I know there's a lot of them, but which team or teams were your favorite to cover?
Cowboy teams?
Yes.
The first thing that jumps to mind, which is usually what you ought to say, is 92, because I'm still really good friends with most of those guys. And so I was an age of where I was like an older brother. I saw what they went through. Michael Irvin came in 88, and Aikman and Stepnoski and Johnston and Norton and Tolbert, and a bunch of them came in 89. And then Emmett came in 90. And the ones who were here in 88, 89, first half of 90, I saw what they went through. And I saw the price they paid physically and emotionally. So to see them get the enjoyment of coming all the way back to a place where no one thought they would that year, that is really special. And the day in Pasadena was the most spectacular day I think I've ever seen. I remember being on the field.
I remember it, and I was 8 years old. It
must have been 3 or 4 hours before the game, a little earlier than usual. And I was out there, and there's still dew on the grass, and the mountains are in the background, and the sun is shining warm. And I mean, it's just a picture postcard. I mean, only God could do that. And it was remarkable just to be there and to appreciate what they had to go through to get to that point. And then if you recall, the game started just awful. And
it was bad. Yeah.
Started taking the ball away and turned into a rout. But for the year, to see what those guys went through and to be really good friends with a lot of them, to understand what it meant to them to have paid that price and get to there, that's probably why 92 would be my favorite. Now, there were some in the late 70s. I started in 76, middle of the year. And some of those teams the whole culture was different. Society was different. The rules of the game were different. But those guys were a lot of fun to be around, and I'm still really good friends with a lot of them to this day. And some of those guys from the 77 championship team, 78 team went to the Super Bowl, and those were some really unusual, special guys, and I loved them too. But I'd probably pick 92.
Yeah, and you're talking about that Super Bowl in Pasadena, the most beautiful clip that I think is still out there. Well, it is still out there, but I think you can't get better than that. The Troy Aikman touchdown pass to Michael Irvin to end the first half, where he kicked his leg out to kind of shield, I think it was Nate Odoms.
I think so.
And Troy throws the ball. It's a perfect spiral, and you see the mountains in the background, and then Irvin comes down with it and turns and hits the pylon. The most beautiful play I've ever seen in my life.
Well, it's not my favorite play in 43 years, but it was a very good. My favorite play in 43 years was in 1979. Last game of the regular season. They're playing Washington at Texas Stadium. The winner is going to this is the football game I ever saw.
Is this the Tony Hill play?
Yeah, but it's not the Tony Hill play because they win the game to win the East, and Washington winds up losing their playoff spot because of other things that happened. But they have injuries. Dorsett didn't play. Drew Pearson was hurt. They're down by 6 with no timeouts right around the 2-minute warning. And Washington has the ball near their own 20, about 3rd and 5. And all Washington's got to do is make a first down. Game's over. Dallas out of timeouts. And John Riggins had gone around the end for 66 yards on a sweep earlier in the game. They ran the same play. And Larry Cole, one of my very favorite all-time Cowboys, a lot of folks listening and watching right now don't know who the heck he is. He just wrote a book about his days as a Cowboy. You can Google him, Larry Cole. He was smart and slow and big. He was about the whitest white man I ever saw. and he certainly couldn't outrun Riggins, who had world-class sprinter speed. But when Theismann took the snap and turned to pitch the ball to Riggins, Larry was so smart that he diagnosed the play from the time Riggins went in motion. And Cole ran through everyone untouched and got to Riggins and threw him for a loss. Now they've got to punt the ball away. Staubach gets it back. Bip, 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 bip. Down the field, Preston Pearson, Tony Hill, Billy Joe Dupree, and then with 2 seconds left, ties the game with the touchdown pass to Hill, and the extra point wins the game. The Larry Cole play to throw Riggins for a loss when if they make a first down, the game's over, that's my favorite play in 43 years.
Well, I was about to ask you which player, not one of the triplets, was one of your favorites to cover. I guess you just answered that.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I loved a lot of those guys. And, those guys, I came in the same age as them. But I will tell you, CJ, that I tell people this all the time. I hate it when people ask me who's your favorite player. I'm really close friends with some of them still to this day. And usually if it's a grown-up who says, who's your all-time favorite player, I say, how many children do you have?
One. I got one.
The one guy that I always say I would have paid to watch was Randy White. Because Randy White practiced like he played, and he created havoc like very few others. And I will tell you that Micah Parsons he has taken up residence in the neighborhood. He's just down the block, and he's about a year or two more like the one he just had away from moving right next door to Randy White.
Wow.
My pantheon of guys I'd pay to see.
Yeah, and then I love the story about it. It just cracks me up. Randy White and Hollywood Henderson, quote unquote, fight in the locker room.
Yeah, I saw it.
Oh, you saw? Oh, you were there.
I was there.
Okay, so yeah,
Thomas got under Randy's skin a little bit. It was after practice, or maybe it was before practice, but it was right around that time. And Randy picked him up and planted him in a locker, and those lockers weren't very big.
That's great.
And in Hollywood, he's on, the NFL Films Dallas Cowboys, Super Bowl deals, and he talks about that. He's like, I got my ass whooped by Randy White.
Well, he's not lying. He's not lying. He about got his anatomy rearranged.
All right. Well, we're wrapping it up, Brad. Thank you again. But before we let you go, we always ask our guests one question at the end, and is, what is your go-to at?
My go-to at Whataburger, if I just had one thing, it might be the fries. There's a lot of those burgers that are real good.
Yep.
I'd be hard pressed to pick between, but those fries now, if they said you can have one thing and one thing only, might be that.
Emily Jones pretty much said the same thing.
Yeah.
We had her on the other day.
Yeah. If Emily said it, then I'm in very good company, and then that means I'm right.
You're always right, sir.
I'm not going to argue with that.
No.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I've enjoyed being with you.
Thanks for listening to the Ranger Report podcast. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and at therangerreport.com.